Hey there, I'm Pete Townsend, and this is Money Never Sleeps. We look inside the minds of entrepreneurs and at the crossover of startups, enterprise, finance, technology, and life as we know it. This week, we're tapping into the intersection of hip-hop, technology, education, and startups with a true pioneer, Arabian Prince. If you know your rap history, you know Arabian Prince is one of the founding members of N.W.A, the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame rap group that redefined music and culture. But what you might not know is that he's also a lifelong technologist, entrepreneur, and futurist. A kid from Compton who got his hands on a computer early and never looked back. From songwriting, rapping, and DJing to producing electro-funk beats and Grammy-nominated #1 hit song Supersonic, to leading innovation in 3D animation, video games, and blockchain, he's been pushing the boundaries of technology for decades. In this episode, we talk about how a chance encounter with an N.W.A-inspired crypto merch baseball cap led to this conversation. And from there, we cover everything: his early love for tech, how music and technology shaped his career, and his mission as founder of Innovate Next Open Labs and co-founder of Innovate Capital to bring the next generation of kids into the world of tech. Arabian's story is all about hustle, creativity, and breaking boundaries, whether it's in music, business, or technology. So this is one you don't want to miss. Let's dive right in with Arabian Prince, all right here on Money Never Sleeps. So Arabian, how's LA today?
LA is always amazing. Nice little sunny day, a little cool, but everybody's rebounded from the fire, so we're all good.
Glad to hear that. No, it's been devastating seeing what's happened. Just wouldn't expect to see that, you know?
Yes, sir.
You and I talking today, there's a bit of a story behind this, and I know I shared it with you, and I've shared it on the podcast before, but just for the audience and the listeners, I just wanted to do a quick whistle-stop tour as to how we even got together to be talking today, which is quite fascinating, quite relevant to how small the tech world really is. No matter how many times you hear the word big tech, it's actually pretty small. I know you don't like the word little, so we got to, so I was at a conference in London, a crypto conference, and I saw someone walking in, someone who I know well, Kenny Ezeji-Okoye, who I invested in through Techstars. And he's wearing, and I showed you the cap,
Yep.
this R.W.A. cap, okay? It is the same font used for N.W.A. And I saw that and I said, I need to get one of those. Long story short, I did. They're the merch that is being shared by a real-world asset crypto platform called Swarm. And so I had the co-founders of Swarm, Philip Piper and Timo Leyes, on the podcast. And I shared this story with Amor Sexton, who is a mentor for Techstars. And she knows you. And she shared the story and shared the pic of the hat with you. And the rest is history. And here we are.
There we go.
And the one thing that's quite interesting about this is that when I had the Swarm guys on the podcast, I said, tell me about the hat. Tell me why you created this R.W.A. cap using the N.W.A. font. And what they said was that generally anyone in their 40s or 50s that are in somewhat of a leadership position in crypto now, and that's where we are, and that's how crypto has evolved, that back in the 80s, there were kids listening to music and perhaps part of the counterculture. In crypto, they are part of the counterculture. Back then, rap and hip hop was counterculture. But for you, this wasn't counterculture. You lived this. This was your life. This was everything you did, you breathed. And out of all that came a kid with a computer in Compton. So maybe let's just get us started on how you got started in tech and what that meant to you.
Yeah, so, growing up as an only child in Compton was kind of, I call it complicated because, you had your parents and people who cared about you, your grandmother and grandfather, who didn't want you in the streets doing stuff. But then you had your uncles and your cousins who were the ones in the street doing that stuff. They were the ones that were like the local criminals and doing all of the bad stuff in the street. So, but they didn't want me out there either. So it was kind of like a good thing that I grew up in that kind of household where everyone kind of cared that I wasn't going to do what people were doing in the hood. And they saw that I was creative. They would come back from overseas. And I remember 2 of my cousins were in the Navy. My other uncle was in the Air Force, and my grandfather was a master sergeant in the Air Force as well. So military family. They would all come back from overseas with all of these things you couldn't get, one, in the US, and two, especially in Compton, right? So here I'm this kid. I remember sitting in the den or in the basement playing with these electronics like ham radios and CB radios. I mean, I was a little kid on a ham radio. I still remember my call sign. I had a license to be on a ham radio as a kid, KAWA 7371. I don't even know I remember
Wow.
that all these years, but you remember because you say it over and over again. So I did those things. And then my cousins would come home with synthesizers. The first synthesizer I ever played with, and I still have in the storage, is a ARC 2600, the one that looked like the mad scientist synthesizer with all the wires that you LFO and LFA and, stuff like that. So I learned a lot of stuff about electronics as a kid. And that's what kind of pushed me into the music scene, being a DJ and, really getting into that whole music thing. And besides, my mother was a classical pianist and my father was a, prolific writer who wrote over 100 books. So that's kind of how
Wow.
I got started.
All right. And then how old were you when you kind of figured out that you could take that computer and you could make some music with it? You had some influence that steered you towards electro-funk, didn't you?
Yeah. So, when I was, I think 15, I got my first turntable that I saved some money up and bought because I had a job, a work permit in the job, working at a old lady's shoe store, putting shoes on old women. You don't ever want to put shoes on old women. Trust me. That
No.
will scare you straight. That will make you want to get another job. So I became a DJ. Me and a buddy of mine, we, pooled our money, got into that. And from that money, I bought a computer. I believe my first computer was a Commodore VIC 20. And I bought a Commodore VIC 20, then I bought a Commodore 64, a 128. Then what really changed my life was I went to, and this is a crazy story. I'm not a thief, but they did it. So, hey, I didn't know
Yeah.
until I got home. I go to Toys R Us at the time because you understand back in those days, computers were so new. They sold computers in Radio Shack, in Toys R Us, right? So I go to Toys R Us to buy the new Commodore computer. I think I was trying to buy another 128, right? And they gave me this box. I paid for it and it said Commodore on it. And I get out to the car and I'm looking at this thing like, I don't remember a Commodore 128 being this big. It was a huge box, right? So get this thing home. It happened to be a Commodore Colt computer. And I'm
Okay.
like, and I had bought games too and stuff to play on the 128. And I'm like, what is this? And it said DOS. What the hell is DOS?
Oh,
Right? It was a
wow.
PC. It was one of the first PCs back then. So, which is totally different than the Commodore ecosystem. So I'm like, well, and I looked it up. It was like $300-400 more than what I paid for it. So, all
Okay.
right, I'm gonna learn this. So that's what got me into learning how to code, learning DOS and getting into that. So once I figured out that this was fun and something to my benefit that I could use to do music, sequence music, and things like that, I was all in. So that was my first foray into touching a real computer, was the Commodore Colt computer.
And when did you then kind of figure out that, all right, listen, we can bring this into rap, bring it into hip hop? And
Yeah.
I think it was Get Together with the World Class Wrecking Crew with Dre,
Yeah.
that some of that was the beginnings of it.
Yeah, so Dre, Egyptian Lover, Unknown DJ, these were all guys we used to DJ with in the hood, doing little skating rinks and stuff. And we'd go by the studio because World Class Wrecking Crew, they had a small studio with the guy who founded it, Lonzo Williams. And we would all go over there and hang out. And I was a little tech guy. I'm the tech kid, I'm like, I know all about this and that. And I was telling everybody I got this computer. I figured out how to program on it and sequence. So I had learned how to sequence music. And we were all as DJs very infatuated with, at the time, and especially in the early 80s, three different types of music. Rap was just, I mean, barely scraping the surface at the time, right? But it was all about electro, funk, and like new wave, right? So we were into like the Prince and the Oingo Boingo and the Depeche Mode, because that's what we were playing as a DJ. That was top
Wow.
40. Then we were into Kraftwerk, right? German group Kraftwerk. And we were into Parliament Funkadelic and Zap. So all of that kind of was the sound that the West Coast kind of jumped on and built this, gumbo pot of sound that became West Coast electro funk. So Kraftwerk, especially, they had two songs, a song called Trans Europe Express and another song called Numbers. And those two songs were pretty much the basis of the song by, it was Planet Rock by African Mbata and the Soul Sonic Force, which is probably one of the biggest dance records of all time, you know. And every other electro funk record is based off of Kraftwerk and then Planet Rock. So that's kind of how we jumped on the bandwagon and started making music.
Yeah, there's an interesting parallel there to what I'm working on and what I know that you've been part of as well with crypto and the composability of blockchain and protocols and building on top of what others had built before, right?
Yep.
And laying tracks down on top of one another and being able to leverage the best tech and a lot of it that you coded yourself and be able to
Yep.
do that. And that's like a huge, massive creative step, not just doing this with coding, but doing this with music. Where did it evolve from there to the point of into N.W.A and then beyond into your solo career after that?
We were all doing our own solo records, and me and Dre used to hang out in Yella a lot, and we met this guy, Easy Dre actually met him, I believe, at a swap meet, the Rhodium swap meet. Met a guy named Easy E, who I always make the joke that he was the neighborhood pharmaceutical technician at the time,
Okay.
and and Dre had some conversations with him. He knew who we were. And, he was like talking about how he wanted to get out of the business he was in because it was getting dangerous. And a friend of his had got killed and, wanted to get into the music business. So we all partnered up and he had some money. We put some stuff together. And next thing you know, NWA was born. And that in itself expanded my technological world because as we went into bigger studios, right? One of my friends and business partners still to this day, Donovan Smith, who owned Audio Achievements, which probably recorded everything that we did and probably 60 or 70% of all the hip hop on the West Coast. He was a very highly technical engineer, had the latest equipment in the studio. And, I remember, we would be in the studio trying to figure out how we could push the envelope. And we would travel as nerds, like I'm the little gangster nerd traveling to the Pomona swap meet to go to the computer fair, and
Yeah.
buy parts to build bigger and better computers to help us make more music. So that was kind of it, man. And, NWA blew up and became an amazing staple in musical history. But for me, it wasn't enough. So while I was touring and doing music, I was traveling around with, I remember I had a handy laptop before anybody had laptops, right? I had a laptop. I think thing only lasted like 30 minutes on a battery. And it had an external floppy disk to run. So they were making fun of me that I'm traveling around with this laptop everywhere, but I was learning how to do sprite animation and CAD and 3D animation and pivoted into doing video games and animation. So, my career split in the late 80s into music and then animation and video games.
There was a musical styles and a musical direction where there was differences there in that clearly gangster rap going in one direction and
Yep.
then electro funk hip hop going in another direction.
Oh, yeah.
And was that part of the decision to move in this direction?
So it was crazy. No, not really. The decision to leave NWA was simply because, I was getting ripped off by my manager at the time, Jerry Heller, who was managing us. And I found out that I wasn't getting the money I was supposed to be getting, especially for a song that I brought to our label, Ruthless, called Supersonic, So that's what was my main concern about getting out because I think the whole electro funk movement, once gangster rap happened and music slowed down, it was dying off anyway. So everything
Yeah.
had gone more to a different beat of the drum, slower
Yeah.
pace. So yeah, but it was definitely when I found out that the money wasn't adding up right for me to leave. And I'm like, I'm making more money over here
Yeah.
doing, animation, video games, a lot of fun stuff. And over here, I'm getting ripped off and getting chased by police and all of this crazy stuff that's going on. Like, I'm out. And that pretty much was it.
Gotcha. And then with the 3D animation and everything that you were building there, how did that take off? I mean, you were working with some pretty interesting folks back in the day.
Yeah, I used to travel between shows to a bunch of conventions, the Comdexes, the SIGGRAPHs, early CES. And I was messing around with a company. I think they were called Intergraph at the time. I ended up being like a poster child for them. They were a big computer company that did high end computers for animation and rendering. And someone walked up to me while I was playing with one of the computers, doing some effects and animation on. He's like, "Man, you're pretty good at this. Would you love to work on a project?" And I'm like, "Well, what you got?" I'm like, "I'm doing other stuff, but what you got?" And he was telling me they worked for a company called Saban, and they had a project called Mighty Morphin Power Rangers. And I was like, "Okay, what is that?" And he's like, "Yeah, would you love to do some effects?" And I'm like, "Sure, let's talk." Ended up working on Power Rangers, Silver Surfer, Adam's Family, Casper, all of these, TV shows on Fox Kids. And then from that, it pivoted into me having meetings at Fox about the Fox Kids stuff and finding out that Fox had just started Fox Interactive, which was the video game division, which I went, "Oh, how can I get in here?" And I ended up
Yep.
over there working on probably over 100 video games between that company and a few other companies that I moved on from. And I'm still making music too. So that was kind of fun times.
Wow. And then bring us forward to Open Labs and
Yeah.
how you got to that point of getting that off the ground and what it's all about.
Yeah. So my company, is simply called Innovate Next and Innovate Next Open Labs, Innovate Capital. I'm a self proclaimed futurist. I'm Willie Walker, right? So you know, I want kids to have that open mind. And one of the problems is a lot of kids, especially in the inner city, don't have access to technology, right? They don't have access to the tools and the thought process. Like, no one's telling them that, hey, this is easy. You can do anything. Everybody's always telling them how hard things are and how hard you have to work. I'm not saying you don't have to work hard. I'm saying in this new modern age that we live in with Google and AI and everything at your fingertips, everyone walks around with a computer in their hand, their phone. Most people don't even realize that their phone is a computer, right? They just use it for social media and making calls. But you have so much information at the palm of your hands that will allow you to do anything. So that's what Innovate Next and Open Labs is about is, getting that mindset of the next generation of kids to understand that you can do whatever you want and it's easy. It's not hard, right? You got to want it, you got to know how to do it, but it's easy. So that's what we're pushing, building tech centers around the country, speaking at schools, and putting in the actual technology in the schools and the curriculums to help these kids get to that next level.
That's great. And you got a physical base for this in Sola, right? In the
Yeah,
Sola Beehive.
Solar Beehive in South LA. I was blessed enough to, meet them early on when they had a vision of building something. At first it was something small and I'm a pest. I'm like the plague. I'm gonna keep bugging you until you want to make it bigger and bigger. And next thing you know, we got a whole building to build this most amazing place with, Eastport Arena, film, television, robotics, and it's been amazing. And now we want to kind of replicate that and just keep doing it over and over across the country.
Is there, just paint the picture for us in terms of one of the kids who's been through one of the Innovate Next Open Labs programs with you
Oh
and
yeah.
how they kind of came out of the other end of it to talk about the impact of that a bit?
Oh yeah. So we work a lot with, the YMCA and the Boys and Girls Clubs as well. And these kids that come from the inner cities, how I deal with them and work with them, and especially when I talk to the teachers, it's kind of like there's STEM, there's STEAM, there's all these programs, right? That they want to teach kids technology. But when I look at the programs coming from where I come from and knowing where they come from, the way a lot of these programs are teaching these kids, it's boring, it's corny. And I'm using kids' words. Like this is what kids say. It's boring, it's corny, I don't want to do this. Why would I want to learn how to make a building, or why would I want to learn how to make a sprocket or gears? What's that going to do for me, right? And I come in with the same curriculum, the same software they're using, and going, hey, they use this software to make Jordans. What? Yeah, they use the same software to design sneakers. They use the same software to design clothes. Or, showing them that you want to learn this because you can do this with it. And the stuff that you love is created with this. Like, do you know that you could go work for Apple. And I think that's one of the problems in schools is it's very rudimentary. They don't show the kids what they're actually interested in.
Yeah, I mean, curriculum is just so outdated from one
Yeah.
school to the next. I mean, my kids here in Ireland, right? They get access to an iPad. It's like, wow, that's huge. That's a
Yeah.
massive step forward for them. And also a chessboard, which is great. One of my kids gets to go play chess in his classroom whenever he wants, whenever anybody
Oh,
would
wow.
play chess with him. So
Yeah.
there a few different ways to do this. But in terms of spreading knowledge, and we talked about this before, Arabian, that the more you share, the more you build. And having that, the first success cases here on this having an impact, that moving it across to the rest of the US, right? How does the approach, or how do you think that approach may differ when you talk about LA versus the rest of the West Coast versus Middle America versus East Coast, right?
Oh, yeah. And
How are you thinking about that?
no, so I'm glad you brought that up because, I travel and speak and I deal with cultures around the world, right? So I did an event a few years ago in Milwaukee, right? And Milwaukee's like night and day from LA, right? You get to Milwaukee, it's freezing cold. They're a beer town,
Yep.
like beer. Milwaukee is big in beer. Milwaukee is big in potatoes because potatoes and beer, it's all these things that go together, which I didn't know. And the big companies in the Midwest are your John Deere's and companies like that, right? So a lot more manufacturing and agriculture and some things like that in different areas. And what I found out is I actually got to visit John Deere companies and found out that wait a minute, that big John Deere tractor over there that's bigger than me, it's just a big rolling computer now. It's not what we used to think about tractors back in the day. It's a computer. It knows how to go and harvest and do you program it, it does its thing. It has an operator. So for me, it's going into these different communities, finding out what goes on in these communities and bringing that to that area and giving access to that so that the kids who live there can go work for these companies in their community.
Yeah, that's great. And I know, a few venture capital firms that say out of Chicago that all they're doing is they're investing in Midwestern companies. That's it. They won't touch East
Yeah.
Coast. They won't touch West Coast because they know that if, they want to build the ecosystems there around tech, they need to do it locally. They need to do it with local money.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's a big story around that. When you think about what you've built over the course of your career, and knowing that you've built a great network of relationships around this, right? How do you leverage your network and your partners in order to execute on your vision here?
Yeah. So, one thing that I even tell young kids learn how to play golf because I make so many connections on the golf course,
That's
right?
great.
I'm pretty much near scratch golfer and play a lot of tournament golf. But I've made so many connections with so many business people on the golf course that have helped in my vision and helped to push things forward. And, another good way that it makes it easier for me is coming from a rap group like N.W.A. because,
Yeah.
you know, if you think about it, most of the people that are our age or my age, they grew up on me, right? So, and
Yep.
they've run most of the companies now. So it's kind of like the guys that grew up on my music run most of the tech companies. And I think it was my buddy Egyptian Lover who was talking about how he was at a Clipper game, and Ballmer, who owns the Clippers and one of the Microsofts, knows who he is because he grew up on our music.
Yep.
So it makes it easier for us to have the meetings, to do the things that we want to do to give back, and for them to see us want to give back, it makes them want to do so as well.
Definitely no, that helps. And so it's just digging into that. It's a nostalgia, like I said
Yeah.
at the beginning, and people remembering, back in the day, I had my old Ford LTD and with a big back deck, and I put my own speakers in that and hooked up an amp and, playing Public Enemy and bouncing that around the place. It was a lot of fun. So,
Yeah, love it.
way back in the day. But what do you think in terms of what you need to have inside of you besides capital and relationships to execute on this? Is there a drive in there that keeps you going?
Just seeing the outcomes, you know what I mean? Just actually looking at the kids who are moving on to the next level, kids who want to go to college, or even if they don't want to go to college, They want to start a successful business because that's one of the things that we also tout is that, yeah, it'd be nice if you did go to college or university, but you really don't have to, because if you really think about it, a lot of the billionaires that are out there never finished college, never finished school. I don't think Zuckerberg or Bill Gates finished college. I think, like even the Google guys, they built their companies while they were in college and then they just moved on and did their thing, so there are ideas being created every single day. And what I often say about the younger generation is their experiences, like the things that they go through, create new businesses, new companies. Like I go back and talk about, I would love to have been a fly on the wall for Snapchat at the time, pitching that, like, hey, we got an app that makes things disappear. What? You wanted to give you money for what? Like, yeah, we got an app where if you send a message, they see the message, but then the message disappears. Like, okay. But if
Yeah.
you think about it from a kid's point of view, they want to be protected from their parents, per se. They don't want their parents to know what they're doing. So it's genius. So my point is there's going to be more and more companies built by these next generation of kids coming up. And we have to embrace that. I always tell my investor friends, how I've made so much money is I follow the young money. What are the kids doing? What are they into? That's where the money should be. Like kids, all the kids are on TikTok. That's where the money, everything's happening over there right now. And then when you see them pivot into something else, hop on that early.
Oh yeah.
That's where the money, yeah,
Oh, big time. Like
yeah,
my 14-year-old, I was talking to her about virality on social media, and there was a startup that I was looking at that was trying to dig into that. And she's like, "But daddy, that virality, those moments only last for like 3 days.
yeah,
There's no point in trying to monetize that." And I'm like,
yeah,
"That's a good point, but we had I don't know if you might have heard, but an incoming head of state over the past couple of weeks might have made a bit of money off of tokenizing virality with $58 million worth of fees accruing over the course of a few days,
yeah,
entering the White House. We'll see
yeah.
how that turns out. But I know that you were in crypto early. And do you see any of the things that you might have taken away from your time in the crypto space and in blockchain? Is any of that kind of carrying over to any of the work that you're doing with kids? Do you kind of try to bring them up the curve on that, or do you just let them kind of find their own natural course?
No, I tell them about everything, and tell them what the blockchain is. And a lot of people, when they hear blockchain and they hear crypto or they hear NFT, all they think about it is, oh, it's something to make money. It's, like, oh, Bitcoin's worth this or that token's worth this. And so it's a money thing. I'm like, that's probably 10% of what blockchain is. There's so much more to blockchain, in the networks and everything and the ledgers and all of these things. And, when I try to teach these kids and they don't want to hear about that stuff, they want to hear about the
Yeah.
cool part of it. I'm like, it's about security and it's about the future of all of our systems, not only the money systems, but everything else. You know what I mean? So that's something that we never talked about is I actually believe blockchain is still very hard to work with, right? And if you want to have something that's secure, that's successful, that you're going to get mass appeal, it has to be something built with consumers in mind.
Yeah, I think blockchain will just disappear from people's vocabularies. It's something that will live on, and that something that is going to be an anchor of, or that is today an anchor of trustless value transfer. But
Yes.
it needs to be packed down and down into the tech stack, and that what's on top of it is what matters. Like you said, when you were showing kids technology around 3D design, it wasn't the tech, it was the fact that you could use that to make a pair of Jordans, right?
Yep.
So it's the outcome, it's what you're building. And someone said recently that what if humans were never meant to use blockchain, never meant to use Web3, and that it was just AI agents who are using that on our behalf? I'll let that one stew for a while. What do you want this all to look like in the next, say, 5 years in terms of your work?
Just to keep pushing access to technology to the next generation of kids, changing the mindsets of the parents and the teachers in the schools, because I think that you can get to the kids, but if you don't get to the parents, the teachers, and the schools, it's still not going to change because they don't have the curriculum, they don't have the tools to let kids explore, you know. So I think with as fast as AI is moving and technology is moving, we need to get these institutions, not only elementary and high schools, but universities are so far behind. Unless you're at somewhere like an MIT, most of these colleges and universities are 10, 20 years behind. Like I hear some of the stuff that, oh, I'm taking this class, and they start telling me what they're taking and they're working on. I'm like, what happened? Like, no, like you're not going to be able to use any of that when you get out. So
Yeah.
yeah, we got to push forward.
I know both of my sisters are professors. I'm the dumb one, right? And that
Yeah.
one came out of MIT and now she's a professor of aeronautical engineering at Olin College of Engineering outside of Boston. The other one is a professor of educational psychology at University of Nevada at Reno. And she works a lot with kids, my younger sister, and works a lot with how kids that learn English as a second language, it's not their native tongue, and how
Right.
they develop their vocabulary and how they develop, their learning patterns and all that. But maybe if we got the two of them together, my sister who's the rocket scientist and my sister who's the educational psychologist, we could get kids learning how to use technology alongside the work
Oh
that you're
yeah,
doing,
1000%. I'd love to meet him at some point.
That would be pretty cool. I'm going to wrap the questions here, Arabian, with the one question that I ask of everybody. What is one thing that people would not expect to know about you?
I would say, well, people know because I always talk about it. I'll give you two, just because. One, I love SpongeBob. Like I've got one of the biggest collections of SpongeBob everything.
I
It's
saw
so
that.
bad.
I
Yeah,
saw that on
it's
your
so
shelf
bad.
when you told me you were Willy Wonka.
Yeah, it's bad. Like it's so bad that one of my tech partners, a company called EVGA that makes computer peripherals, I would work with them. We would do streaming episodes with their fan base to raise money for different charities. And, they were so appreciative. One, I don't know if I can't remember if it was Christmas or whatever. They literally paid a guy to build me a SpongeBob computer from scratch. Like I have to send you a picture one day. It's this huge thing. It's got legs and arms and SpongeBob, and it's a computer, and it's the greatest thing. And I'm just that's one thing that you think this little. And I'm gonna give you another one. This one's even
Wow.
crazier. When I worked with, I don't think it was five, I think it was with Vindy Universal, working on video games. They asked me what game I wanted to lead, because they have team leads that lead certain video game products. And I asked them at the time, well, what's your biggest property? Like, I want to manage and lead the biggest property you got. And they told me it was Barbie. I'm like, done. So people would come by my desk and I would have like this Barbie stuff all over my desk. And I'm like, we gonna say something about that?
Yeah.
Nobody would ever say, like, "What, you gonna say something about my Barbie?" Like, this is like, it's the biggest property here. Like,
Huge.
so that's the thing. Yeah.
Wow. And then when the movie came out, where you're like, you missed a trick here?
Oh my God, the movie was funny. It was funny. You got to make those decisions. Like, I'm from the rap group N.W.A, but you can't be stupid, especially when you're dealing with video games or animation. What do you want to work on? Like, I want to work on the best, the biggest property. And whether or not it's a pink skinny girl wearing pink or whatever, I want to work on the best.
Yep. Yep. I want to be the best at what I do. What about you?
There
That's
you
a way
go.
to look at it. And listen, there's an open invitation for you to come over here to Ireland to play on some of the world's best golf courses.
Oh, dude, I
I
have. I already have. And I will be back. Matter of fact, when am I over there again? I want to come over for one of the DP, either one of the DP or European. So I'll let you know if I get there. I try to come when the weather's a little better.
Yeah,
I've been over
yeah.
there when it's cold.
June,
Yeah.
July. Actually, June is probably our
Yeah.
summer.
And I still DJ over there from time to time at some of the clubs. So I'll let you know if I ever get back over there.
You know who's playing here is the tickets go on sale. I think Friday morning is Kevin Hart. Um,
Oh, wow.
so he's coming to do a comedy show in this place called the Three Arena, which holds about 16,000 people. So I'm going to see if I
Right.
can get tickets for that. He was so hilarious on that roast of Tom Brady. Did you watch
Oh,
that?
yeah. Yeah, I did
Yeah.
watch that.
He took a lot of heat himself on that one.
I
That,
love it.
That was funny. That was funny. All right. And what's the best way for people to get in touch with you, Arabian, and learn more about Innovate Next and Open Labs?
The best place to check me out is just at OG Arabian Prince on all my social, like OG Arabian Prince on everything from LinkedIn to Instagram to. I'm not really much of a TikTok. I'm not really much of a social media guy, but I'm a serial reposter. Like other people post cool stuff about me, I repost it. But yeah, or they can just go to Innovate Next and check us out and see what we're doing. But yeah, I'm out there doing so much, and like you said, we can't take it with us, but we can plant the seed in the future and let them just keep planting more seeds and growing more, intellectual trees around the world. So
That's it. That's it. I absolutely love it. Well, thank you, Arabian. Appreciate you coming on to the show and sharing your story. And like I said before, it's a story that needed to be told. And I know you do a lot of that already, but thank you for doing that here with me, with the audience. So I appreciate it.
I appreciate you. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. That does it for this week, folks. Thanks to Arabian for opening up his mind to help us figure out why he does what he does. Check out the show notes on moneyneversleeps.ie for all the relevant links to learn more about Arabian Prince and his life's work. Also, a big shout out to Timo Leas, Philip Piper, and Katie Evans from Swarm for giving me the R.W.A. cap that started this whole thing. If you like what you heard, please leave us a rating and a review on Spotify, Apple, or on moneyneversleeps.ie/rate. Thanks to Conan Brophy from Create Sound for mixing and editing this episode. Conan is an excellent media man to get in touch with when you're thinking about launching your own podcast. As for me, I'm an early stage startup investor in the next version of the internet, and I lead the Techstars Web3 Accelerator. There are plenty of links in the show notes on moneyneversleeps.ie on how to get in touch with us, so don't hesitate to reach out. Finally, till next time, thanks for listening. See ya!
Money never sleeps, pal.